Jon Smart. Welcome to the latest Sooner, Safer, Happier podcast. I am delighted to be joined today by Willie Stegmann and Alena Keck. Willie, Alena, welcome.
Hi, John. Thank you. Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you for inviting us.
Pleasure. Thanks for being here. And you're going to talk to us today about OKRs at Vodafone. First of all, if we could start out with some introductions. Willie first.
Thank you, John. Yes, I'm the CIO of corporate IT services at Vodafone Group. I've spent the last 8 years between Vodacom in South Africa and Vodafone, always in the IT technology organization. My background is originally many years ago engineering. I've worked in 4 different industries, mostly in technology leadership roles, and I really am very passionate about topics like OKR. How do you manage and steer systems to different outcomes? I think it's a very, very interesting conversation, something that's evolved a lot over the last 20 years. And today we're going to talk about around OKRs. My brief with Alena, my team across Vodafone, was really to introduce OKRs into the organization. We're going to, I'm sure, delve into the how, what, and why, and some of the learnings, because there are lots of learnings. I think it was a brave step that we took. The organization maybe wasn't as ready as we were at that point, but it's been a fantastic journey, and I think lots of learnings between Alena and myself that we can share. So really looking forward to the conversation. Alena.
Yeah, so my name is Alena Keck. I am head of Lean and Agile Center of Excellence at Vodafone. And similar to Willie, I'm really passionate about driving purposeful transformation. For example, OKRs is driving the outcome-driven transformation, which is really exciting. And throughout my career, before I joined Vodafone, I had the chance to lead a variety of large-scale transformation programs within US and Europe, in automotive, financial services, and now also in the telco and in the companies like Mercedes and Porsche, for example. And here at Vodafone, our team is calling ourselves Change Igniters. Right, so we are here to drive continuous improvement, sustainable change, which is really people-driven. And we are supporting large transformation programs and driving innovation, like, for example, for Global Hackathon. And the original purpose, how the team was created many years ago and kind of by Silke Eggert, was to connect strategy to execution. And OKR is this one piece, which is really like a glue to connect strategy to execution. Therefore, really excited to talk to you, John, about this topic.
Great. Thank you, Willie. Thank you, Alena. I'm just going to call out a couple of things I heard there. Alena, I heard you say people-driven. I like that. It's all about people. It's, my rule of thumb, this is 80% culture, only 20% process. So I love the fact you said that. And Willie, I like the fact that you said that, you embarked on this journey of adopting OKRs even if the organization wasn't ready. And I don't think an organization ever is ready necessarily for something that's different or new. And it requires courage and vulnerability. So it's great that collectively you exhibited courage as a team to experiment with new ways of working. So in terms of the context, in terms of the situation, I'd love to hear a bit more about Vodafone, about the context that you're in and the scope for OKR adoption. So perhaps if you could expand a bit on the situation.
Very happy to do that. So John and Alena will also provide her perspective. Vodafone is one of the largest telecommunications operators globally. It's mobile and fixed operator. It operates in around 21 countries. It's also invested heavily in 5G technologies over the last couple of years, and I think everybody is very aware of what's happening in the UK with a joint venture with 3, and really underpinning that is to bring the 5G technology and the power and to improve experience for consumers. We have been on a journey, given the realities in telecommunications industry. It's heavily regulated, lots of pricing pressure. Lots of technology pressure as well. So to run a successful enterprise the size of Vodafone, in the best interest of all the stakeholders, including shareholders, obviously is not easy. So we have been on a journey to transform ourselves, reinvent ourselves, pretty much from when I joined 8 years ago. We've also streamlined the organization somewhat. So you would have seen us exiting a number of markets, Spain, Italy. I've mentioned the joint venture in the UK. So when Margarita, our CEO, talks about the organization, she mentions Vodafone is changing and has changed very, very often. So the environment is a very, very dynamic environment. It's not static. It's very dynamic. It's very responsive to what's happening in the market. And you have to be, otherwise you simply won't survive. In technology in particular, you can imagine this is a technology company. So technology, including IT, plays a very critical enabling role. How we service our customers, the products that we make available to customers through our networks, be it fixed or mobile, over the last years have evolved to become a lot more digital, a lot more real-time, and a lot more dynamic. And things like AI allows us to know a lot more about our customers. Think about 300 million customers we've got across Vodafone. It's a large number. So IT technology is not an incidental part of the business. It is the business. We are, for all intents and purposes, a technology company. And given the fact that, as I said earlier, Vodafone has gone through a lot of transformation and is going through transformation, it then follows logically that IT needs to reinvent itself. And so in terms of our operating model, in terms of how we deploy our skills, our capabilities to meet the demands of this very dynamic organization, and I've been very much part of the leadership team that have gone through this. Vodafone is I would say, a fairly decentralized organization. So you've got autonomous companies, markets, in a lot of cases, like in our African markets, with minority shareholders. So this is important, and we'll touch on that through the conversation. It's not a situation where somebody in our head office in Paddington can decide we're going to do this, and then the organization just follows, religiously. It doesn't work that way. So it's a lot more onerous in this very complex operating model to establish a new order, a new way of doing things. It requires a significant effort because it's not by decree. It's by buy-in and value and alignment and leadership effort that you actually get this done. So IT per definition has a centralized component that's fairly light, a corporate component, and Alena and myself being part of that over the last couple of years, but also quite a significant shared services business that we're now commercializing. It's called Voice, with a big presence in India as well as in Egypt, Romania, and a few other markets as well. And so the whole idea is to leverage the scale and to really support this dynamic, fast-changing organization. Because one of the things that IT has always been criticized, we're just not fast enough. You're not responsive enough. We always need to tell you this is business, way to go. And you're holding the organization back. So I think we're very mindful of the fact that we have to be super adaptable and change to the strategic reality of the organization. Like most large organizations, you can imagine there's lots of conflicting priorities across the different domains, be it digital or servicing the customers or investing in our network. So CapEx envelope is only so big. It hasn't grown over the last few years. So always a very robust debate. Where do we spend our next CapEx pound or euro, right? And what will that be, and how do we do that trade-off? And as you know, Jon and Alena, that's always a tough leadership conversation to make those decisions. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why OKRs is also critical, because that gives you a very clear, true north to say, if you define the OKRs very accurately from an outcome point of view, to Alena's point, to the strategic imperative, then your investments, the logic should follow that your investments should actually enable those outcomes, should enable those strategic results that you seek from that point of view as well. And the one good thing is in Vodafone, maybe last point before I hand to Alena, is that we have been, I think, pretty clear and consistent in terms of our strategic pillars. And you'll hear us talk about customer pillar, our growth pillar, and our simplification pillar. And so we've been able to calibrate our OKR journey to those strategic priorities and pillars very, very well. And the OKRs then clearly that goes further down in the IT organization. The idea would be is to build up to those outcomes and for us to be able to articulate very carefully how we contribute to those strategic priority areas from that point of view. So exciting times, very dynamic organization, but there's no quick wins here. You don't just drop OKRs magically from the top and then everybody falls into line. And Alena will tell you it doesn't work that way. Alena, over to you.
Yeah, I think, Jon, to set up some context around the OKRs, right? As Willie mentioned, Vodafone is such a large organization, and we had in the past a couple of pots of success in different markets. And what would be interesting to know is actually that the markets, like for example UK or Turkey, who experimented with OKRs, were at the same time the markets which demonstrate higher agility or agile maturity. We also realized that what Willie mentioned, in order to bring something on a large scale, to bring the markets together, all the markets from Vodafone, and align them to the strategic priorities, this is something which was really new, and this is something which we piloted within digital and IT. And remember, Jon, 2 years ago when you were at our very first Vodafone Agile conference, where you presenting okay, not okay OKRs, this was kind of a little bit a catalyst of change and catalyst and spark to create OKR champions, OKR enthusiasm, and the OKRs were starting to get more traction in even more areas, right? And then on a bigger scale within digital and IT, we finally decided to go this step and connect the OKRs to our 3 pillars, as Willie mentioned, customer simplicity and growth, and provide direction to the whole digital and IT organization, which include all these markets from Vodafone and Vodacom. And this is what we would like to talk to you about today and share our learnings.
Great. Thanks, Willie and Alena. So what I'm hearing is a very large organization. I'm hearing autonomous business units. I'm hearing the word alignment to strategic pillars. I'm hearing a link to investment. Those are the key themes I'm hearing. So a non-trivial scenario. So then in this large complex environment with autonomous regional business units, in terms of adopting OKRs, how did this come about, and what are OKRs? Because so far we've been talking about we've been using a 3-letter acronym, but we haven't defined it yet. So what are OKRs, and why have you chosen to adopt OKRs?
So maybe, Jon, let me start with what, and Willie would really be the best one as our biggest sponsor to present the why, right? So for me personally, OKRs are here to help such large organizations like, for example, digital and IT, to bring alignment, to bring focus on the very, very critical priorities, and to translate our complex strategy into something which is tangible, which is clear, which people can execute upon, to connect strategy to execution, this glue which is required to do that. And also to connect our objectives, for example, for a year, to a corporate strategy, right? To a bigger picture, and bring everyone into alignment, what matters for our customers, and how do we translate our technology objectives into the results which are impacting our customer experience, right? So while the objectives are bringing alignment, the key results is really something which is our success metrics, quantification of our success, and also setting the aspiration level, right? How aspirational do we want to go about customer experience, customer satisfaction, time to market, for example? So this would be kind of my summary of understanding of OKRs. But Willie, why did we embark on this journey?
I ask myself that question often. I think it's been an interesting journey because, let's be clear, the decision to introduce OKRs in a large organization is an easy one. I think to make it happen is really, really tough, right? But I think that when we get to the end of this podcast, I'm pretty sure listeners will be encouraged to say that it's a journey worth taking. but you need to be mindful of why you're doing it and some of the pitfalls and challenges and learnings as you go through the journey. I think that for me, the why really starts around the business imperative. And I said it earlier, given the fact that Vodafone is under a microscope in terms of performance, from shareholders, from the market, given the challenges in the industry as well. It follows then, being a technology company, that IT needs to be very precise in terms of how we apply our resources. And how do we give the organization a sense of comfort that we are going to deliver at pace what we require to do and what's being prioritized. And so there was definitely a feeling at the digital and ITC leadership team level that we needed a mechanism that moved beyond the traditional KPIs, and to call it the leading measures. And Alena will talk about also how do we move from leading measures to lagging or outcomes-based measures, and focusing more on that than the latter. The default comfort zone position, I think, for IT teams is always the KPIs. In terms of how quickly do we apply projects or change in the organization, what's the stability, did we have any large incidents, et cetera, et cetera. So how many people did we train? Those are typically KPIs that are well known, but they by themselves typically are too many. There are thousands of them in a large, complex organization. And if you don't apply your mind in terms of linking these leading indicators, these KPIs, to specific strategic outcomes, they may miss the mark. You may be applying a lot of effort, resource, pressure on the wrong KPIs. That's not necessarily strategically moving the organization forward. And I think that was a discussion that we had at the leadership team level, to really get to the point where we need to now emphasize the outcomes and the alignment to business outcomes, as opposed to purely the activity that keeps us busy, which would be the leading indicators. We were fortunate that, and I said that earlier, Alena as well, that the organization simplified the strategic measures in terms of the purpose of the organization, and also our strategic pillars and focus areas. And this is an important prerequisite, John, because if you don't have that, the strategic priority areas and the outcomes that you seek, we want to serve our customers better. We have 300 million customers. If we don't serve them, they're going to go somewhere else. We have to really simplify the organization, because a complex organization slows us down and it drives cost. And we have to grow the franchise. In Europe, especially, our mobile numbers for all the operators are really static and stagnant in many respects. In Africa, it's different. In some of our emerging markets, you still see growth. You need to find those engines of growth. So the organizations were very clear in terms of the strategic focus areas. So for us to calibrate against that was relatively straightforward. I think something else that I wanted to introduce, that I'm pretty sure all organizations are struggling with, John, and Alena, you'll agree with me, and that's around how do we track value? We mentioned earlier that we are spending a lot of capex, right? That happens in all enterprises. We're not always sure if we're spending it on the right things. Sometimes it's a little bit hit and miss through our portfolio processes. And then we have execution issues. We mentioned Agile earlier and waterfall and all the challenges associated with that. And then the big thing is at the end of the day, are we moving the dial? Are we indeed improving customer service? Are we removing costs? And how do we track that? And we're also seeing research from Gartner that supports the notion that there's a lot more focus on, are we getting return on our investment? Given the fact that there's so much pressure on enterprises to perform, we can't just willy-nilly throw bread in the water and hope something magic is going to happen here. And so OKRs really helps us to put a lot more focus on, especially in our large, what we call our signature initiatives, where we're spending a significant amount of CapEx. Are we getting return on that? How do we track value? How is it reported? And how does it feed into our OKRs as well? So to really put focus on translating those objectives into measurable OKRs, and Alena will talk about that, I'm sure. And then value and monitor the value envelope, how that the value is extracted post the go live. And so I think what we opted to do was, and this I can recommend, and Alena will agree with me, is that we started in my portfolio in CIS the corporate IT services. Relatively small. We could put our arms around it, and we introduced the OKRs there first, and we could prove to ourselves that it's possible to get the mechanism of the OKR introduced into Vodafone in call it a friendly environment, in the family, so to speak, and where we could learn and experiment. So before we rushed into the CTO leadership team and said, look, let's do this across the whole of Vodafone, we could actually show them some of the things that we'd done in CIS with the support from Alena and the team, to draw up some meaningful OKRs and to at least get to a point where there was an engagement tool once we've agreed to OKRs with the teams through quarterly QBRs, etc., to start reviewing progress and start feeding it back into the OKR mechanism. So it's not only setting OKRs, it's also tracking and obviously getting to a conclusion. Are you indeed supporting those strategic outcomes or not? And I think it's really worked well, Alena. You would agree with me that we learned a lot in CIS and we could apply some of that thinking. It was a fairly diverse environment. It's not like the corporate IT is homogeneous and everything is the same. It was quite different. Alena's lean portfolio management strategy, architecture, into how we manage some of our HR, finance, procurement platforms, very, very different. And yet we could put the OKR umbrella across it, which then told us, Jon, that there's something here. We think that we have data points. We can with confidence now go to the leadership team and say, let's roll this out beyond the borders of CIS from that point of view. But maybe Alena wants to pick up the story from there.
Yeah, I think really I would maybe add some details on the how and how it's different to what we did in the past, right? You already started explaining more the people element and the kind of cultural element, right? Experiment in friendly environment, scale it. And I think what was really eye-opening and from the very beginning, what was important for us is not rolling out the method, rolling out the framework, or do a mechanical rollout, but really start with people and culture. And how did we do it? We started with co-creation, right? So if management by objective is really top down, what we actually did is we co-created the or key results, the objectives with the leaders from, for example, the whole technology organization. We had interview with them. We showed our strategy on a page, our three pillars, customer simplicity and growth. We showed the aspiration from our CTO of trusted business partner pyramid, right? This is something how he brings the whole technology organization together on a page. And we asked them, okay, so this is the corporate strategy. These are the technology objectives and technology success factors. So what are the pain points? What would be the most important objective for this fiscal year? What would be the measurable results, how we can measure this success? And every time we talk to the CIOs, we would create a draft. We would start iterating from CIO to CIO with a draft. And at the end, it was created by everyone, right? And we had, Willie will most likely expand on it later, we also engaged the extended leadership team. So to get even more buy-in and more recognition and thought leadership into the objectives and key results to demonstrate it's not just top-down, it's top-down, bottom-up, everything meets together and needs to be interpreted. We also worked very strongly with our tech strategy and our strategy and architecture team, because it was very important for us that we connect to something which we are not only communicating for 1 year, but for 3 years, 5 years from now, so that we tell the same consistent story. And what was also very important, and I think, Jon, as we talked in the past, you mentioned it's like a ninja move, right? That we introduced with Willie's support the OKR sponsors within our CTO leadership team, right? So that everyone, even though one CIO would be responsible for one market, on the OKR side, this person was responsible for cross-functional, across markets, for example, time to market, or around, for example, deep detractors. So this would be the ownership not only for a specific market, but also for all the different markets to bring this perspective together. So I think this was very, very big cultural move, also for our CIOs. And of course, the accountability piece, right? So creating those quarterly reviews, bringing the progress, impediments, and bringing it together to life. This was also something which is very important. And doing a retrospective after 1 year. We had the interview again with the CIOs and asking them what worked well, what didn't work well, what we want to include in the next year, and bringing it back and playing it back to the leadership team.
Love it. So I'm going to recap on some of the key points that I heard there. So back onto the why, Willie, what I took from what you said is effectively you said focus on outcomes over output. We're talking about
effort.
Have we delivered the project? Previously, the focus is on did we deliver the project by the project date, typically put together at the point of having determined the least, typically without a measure of value. Typically it's did we do the project where we did the business case probably 18 months ago. So I heard a focus on outcomes over output, and that's a journey that lots of organizations are on. I heard very clear strategy alignment, customer growth, simplicity as your 3 pillars, and then being able to demonstrate with the OKRs the alignment to the strategic pillars is what I heard. And you also mentioned investment and money. Money is it's like the blood flowing through the veins. It's like it is such an important topic, how stuff gets funded. It's such an important topic, and it can create agility or it can inhibit agility funding. I like that dimension of making sure that the investment, the capex, is going on the most strategic things, and you're determining the most strategic things through an articulation of the outcome, not building the bridge, not the output. So, i.e., we want to cross the river is the outcome, and we can flex how we get there. And then the other key thing I heard is around value measures and actually being able to measure value. You spoke about KPIs. In my experience, typically an organization will have 300, 400, 500 KPIs and key results. The KR is a subset of them, and that's where focus comes in. So those are kind of the key things I heard, Willie, you say around the why. And then Alena on the how. I love the fact that you said people and culture. I love the fact you said co-created. What I'm hearing here is invite over inflict is what I'm hearing. And I love the think big, start small, learn fast, as in you started in CIS, proved it before going bigger. In my experience, those are all patterns for success. So for other people listening to this, for people listening to this, trying to do this in a large organization, not a big bang, not a top-down mandate, co-creating. Those are all recipes for success. So in terms of the how, and just building on what you said, Alena, is there any other learnings you've got on the how? Any other learnings around what went well, what's not gone so well? Any other advice for people?
I'll cover a few, and then Alena will also pick up from her perspective. But I think both of us will agree that this is still work in progress. I think we sort of 2 years into the journey, we are making good progress. Also in terms of operationalization, and I would say good buy-in, but it's been quite an effort to get there. And I think whoever undertakes this, you need the leadership resolve, you need the tenacity, and the drive. And it's not a positional thing. It's not like Willie is the CIO of corporate, so it follows the organization will support. It requires personal, I think, drive and tenacity. I mean, Alena had to show that from her position. I had to, the rest of the team. And there were points and times where you sort of said, is this going to work? But you have progress and then a bit of fallback, buy-in, and then you have to go and revisit topics that you've already covered, right? I think some of the things that we learned is always it's very, very important to make work visible, and maintain ongoing open and regular communications around performance. And that's where things like the QBRs, but also the good old, if you go back to Agile, the huddles, the stand-ups, whatever you want to call them, they have a very important place because that's where you make work visible and you make progress visible. So I think that feeds a little bit into that ways of working, which we've been talking about for a number of years. And it builds on that. It's not like, agile, more responsive way of working in the organization. We're done with that. Now we're doing something else. We're now doing OKRs. These things are very much aligned and support each other. It's really important that you get the leadership team to force them to focus on the big things. Because like you say, John, the comfort position is to, take out a piece of paper with 300 KPIs on there. We all have them. They're there, they're measured, they've been around for many, many years. So, well, this is what I do, so why ask difficult questions? But if you start saying, but hold on, let's reduce the 300 to a small number of manageable key results, that's not easy. That means that some people that are very leaders even, that are very passionate about certain things being visible, you're actually saying, you know what, on this one page, and by the way, this is the other important thing, it's a one-pager, not a two-pager or a three-pager. It actually fits onto one page, right? How do you get all of this? Well, you can make the font so small that you can't read it, but I mean, let's be real. You need to remove things. And for us as leaders to remove things or to say no are two of the most difficult things to do. We don't like to remove things, and we don't like to say no. We like to say yes to everything. And so that's been a really, really key learning for us is to really force the conversation to the significant few and to say you're going to fit it onto one page. And Alena will remember those conversations that we had. Is that you always want more. You don't want to remove things, but we managed to get it eventually from that. We just say, look, it doesn't mean that KPI is not important. It doesn't mean that work's not happening. We're just not saying that in terms of the outcomes that we want to enable now, that is directly mission critical for us. It's the foundational. It has to be there anyway. But the fact that it doesn't contribute to the organization becoming simpler. You need there very specific key results, and that's what you're focusing on. I think the other one is measurement on the key results. Alena will agree with me if I say that what we've learned is that in these iterative, interactive sessions with the leadership team where you reduce the conversation to the significant few to the one-pager, if you find it hard or you're not able to measure a specific key result, it's likely that through the year that difficulty will continue unless there's a very specific intervention. And so what we've seen is that the key results that we know we can measure, they're there, they're easy to get to. That's where you have immediate traction and focus. If you say, we've got a key result here, we can't measure it, but we'll find a way to measure it. Often you don't find a way, or you don't have capacity or teams or focus on that. So that should be the few and far between where you say, we'll find a way through the year and we'll find a way to measure it. Often it's more difficult from that. So even value realization, John, you'll agree with me, Alena, it's not easy because, as you say, a project goes live. Now you have to track costs and you have to track revenues. This project, did it indeed lead to higher sales? Did it lead to an incremental lift in revenues? Often you can't measure that, right? So it's not that easy to track a business case, from that point of view. So that's the other one that I think we're still on a journey. I think the team consensus and participation, Alena, you would agree is really tough. You were very much in that to say, how do we get all the voices? You mentioned the sponsorship, I think is a good win for us. It was a key learning. Is to pull them in on a certain set, let's say simplicity OKRs, get one or two of the leadership team to actually support those, to put effort in terms of the tracking, reporting, the feedback in the leadership mean, as opposed to Alena does it or I do it or some other proxy, right? The leadership team must actually own the OKRs. I think that's been a really important conversation. We also extended the impact of the OKRs, not only in the core digital and IT leadership team, but also what we call the extended leadership team. And that can be upwards of 80 to 100 people that are leaders. And they also played an important role. And of course, they have to make the key results. They have to bring it to reality. So they've got a critical role to play, even though you can't engage all of them in one large plenary to get to the one pager. That would be the more senior leadership team to get that. Alena, I think, mentioned, and many done, is the top down and the bottom up. I think you have you have to find that balance. And it's a little bit of a function of the culture of the organization. As I said earlier, I think we both said that, we are fairly decentralized, and you can't just rely on a top down. You also have to really do effort and put work down in terms of the organization where the actual work happens, and how the two will meet. If you're already very mature in terms of managing and making work visible, if you're already a very agile organization and you have modern ways of working, I think that will help you to introduce OKRs, because, as I said earlier, I see them as very complementary. I don't see them as very different things. But I think we're learning. We can't really say we've got all the answers. Certainly we don't. We're still on the journey, and every day we learn more. But I think we've made good progress, Alena.
Yep, I agree. A couple of other learnings, Jon, for us to share. I mean, Willie already mentioned less is more, right? And kind of the downside of the co-creation, that we came up like with 30, 40 key results, right? Because everyone wanted to contribute, and everyone wanted something which is meaningful and important for them to land on this one pager, right? So we really had to drastically reduce and communicate it again and again. We need to come up with 3 to 5, right? It was very, very hard, but at the end we were managed to do it. Another learning, again, people and culture, we actually have in the growth pillar, we have a people pillar, right? So we added some of the key results, which were actually really around people, right? This is something which is really emphasizing the importance of people and culture. While we were introducing OKRs, we were also rewriting the strategy beyond 2025. So what we decided to do is to stay in strong connection with our tech strategy and our strategy and architecture team. And at the same time, to also help them to think through beyond 2025 and how can we from the very beginning incorporate OKRs in the next cycle of the strategy. Another learning is using kind of the crawl, walk, run. You don't run with the OKRs from day one, and you need to set the expectation that at the beginning you need time to crawl. You need to start small. You maybe at the beginning not all the baselines were there, or not all the key results were clearly defined in the first OKR review. But we still did the review, right? In the next one, we already had a much better review. We had a couple of results to show. We have progress to show. We have a couple of examples from the markets, right? So every time it evolved. So we went from crawling to walking. And we were also very honest in saying, okay, today is a crawling day, right? So it's our first OKR review. And Willie was really setting the stage and setting the expectation. Do not expect that we have like this magic tool with all the key results. We at the beginning have a spreadsheet, right? We started very small, and once we prove the value, this is where we can grow and learn and scale something which is important for us. And also on the measurement, what we realized is that even though we have 300 KPIs, they are not always outcome oriented. And some of the things, like, for example, time to market, every market measures it in a different way. We first needed to create a key result, which is more qualitative rather than quantitative, to define how do we measure time to market? What is our time to market standard? What is the framework we will be using, right? And then set up the baseline and start to improve the time to market, right? So this is something which was one of the key learnings for us as well.
Great. I really like how adopting objectives and key results almost becomes a forcing function, which forces you to go and get better data. Or like you just said, Alena, it forces you to have a standard definition, a standard taxonomy. As you just said, what was it? Lead time, you said? Release time?
Time to market.
It's like a forcing function, whereas our previous way of working with, an annual bottom-up, top-down submission of projects, the definition of success is, did you hit the milestone in the project plan on the date you said you would? And it's not data-centric. It's like, did you build system X, as opposed to, have we reduced time to market? So I really like the fact that it forces a focus on measurement and data. And Willie, data was something you mentioned as well, and the need to have data, and the need to get data, and the need to make it visible, and the need to focus. This is a learning from the late 1800s. Scientific management. There was a drive, predated Taylor, Frederick Winslow Taylor, there was a drive where management was viewed to be a science, and this came about in the late 1800s. And organizations did a really good job of gathering a lot of data, and this was the beginning of cost accounting and production control. And you know what? In the age of digital, we have forgotten about a way of working that we exhibited in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, because in the age of digital, we have had hardly any data. Most organizations don't visualize the system of work and aren't capturing leading and lagging indicators. There's lots of KPIs, but not with intelligence, like with key results. So that really resonates. That really resonates for me.
Just to add to what you're saying, one of the reasons I think is that in the industrial age, to change a process or to adjust or to change an outcome was very, very difficult, because you had to move machinery, you had to retrain people. It was very physical. It was very expensive, right? I think in the age of digital, to write another app, to change a process, to kill a platform or whatever, it's easy. You can do it, and you can relaunch something else tomorrow very quickly. So I think a lot more around trial and error, and say let's see what happens. Let's not measure and look at the data and then that will give us the answer. Let's put it out there in front of the customer, see how they respond. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, we course adjust. So I think the world is, and I'm not suggesting the one is right and the other one is wrong. I do think over time we've become a lot more experiment orientated, because technology allows us to be more experiment a lot more and course adjust dynamically.
And you have to be, don't you? Because it's an emergent domain of work. It's not deterministic. Ask yourself the question: how many times have we done this thing before in this context with these people? We're not building the same software a million times a day. We're doing it once and realizing that it's wrong, writing it, refactoring it, and then shipping it again. So we kind of have to be experimental, and we need the data feedback loops to know if our experiments are heading in the right direction or not, both leading and lagging. And this is a new competence for most organizations, is actually to get good at data. And that's the KRs, and this kind of touches on something you said earlier as well, Willie, around the ability to come up with measures which are measurable. You can demonstrate causality. So when you're nimble and you're adaptable and you're delivering value on a frequent cadence, you can have causality, because cause and effect is close together in time. If you're very waterfall and it takes you 24 months to ship something, you can't have causality, because the macroeconomic environment has changed. So what I'm seeing companies that do this really well have dedicated teams on data, dedicated central teams on data, both for the OKRs, for the KRs, for the what, like the investment in the CapEx investment, but also for the OKRs on ways of working, the OKRs on how we do what we do, quality, value, time to value, safety, and happiness. So that really, what you said there around data really resonates. Another thing that resonates is the crawl, walk, run. And I really like what you said, Alena, and what I think you did, Willie, which is setting the expectation that it won't be perfect. So, hey, everyone, this is going to be imperfectly perfect or perfectly imperfect. And that, I think that creates psychological safety. It's like, oh, good. Oh, good. Oh, phew. It's okay if it's not perfect. So I like that.
No, absolutely. And you have to get the leadership team to buy into that up front.
And
the other thing is also transparency and honesty, because if you set this up properly, it will show up where in a particular area and the team are not performing, or they're not achieving their key results, and that's distracting from the outcomes that we seek. And so that's also, you need maturity, because you're sitting with a leadership team, and it may be in my area that's now all of a sudden not contributing to the extent, and it's maybe diluting the impact of a specific key result, and as a result an OKR that we've committed. And so the maturity in the team through the QBR should be, we are okay to have those conversations. and to be transparent and open where certain things have not gone as well as we thought. And that's okay. You know, it's not about me trying to defend and say it's all perfect. It's not. Be open, be honest, be real. The data should actually show what's really happening, and everybody should be comfortable. And it may be that in this review, in my area, I've got a few challenges with key results, and the next review, it will be one of the other colleagues. But it's okay, because that's the maturity. It's easier said than done. Easier said than done.
Definitely is easier said than done. Yeah. You said that's the maturity.
Yeah.
I agree. It's be careful about weaponizing metrics.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, it is about relative performance, and my area is doing well. So there's always that element of competitiveness, right? And there's healthy, it should be there. And nobody wants to be shown up or, oh, he missed his KRs, key result in this particular area. Why did he? Is he not on top of it? So it can be uncomfortable. So I think the leader and also the member of the teams must create a safe environment. I think we used the word earlier. Really a safe environment where it is okay and it's fine to be really open and honest and robust. Because at the end of the day, as a collective, we're contributing to those larger outcomes that contributes to the strategic imperative. And that's what we're here for. It's not about the colleague-to-colleague dynamic and who's winning and who's losing.
Yes, that's a really, really important point. As a leader, leaders at all levels in all roles I'm going to repeat what you said, create safety around the measurement. So I've seen organizations where there's been a lack of psychological safety around data. And what happens is the data is hidden. And, literally with body language, it's like doing this with body language, kind of holding your arms up and crossing your arms in front of you, saying, nobody's going to see my data if there's a lack of psychological safety. So that's it.
I'll show you what my data looks like.
Yeah.
and it then presents a particular perspective or view. Yeah. And that may or may not be a reflection of reality. And you mentioned that the data team that's a little bit more objective. And I think that's also important, that you find ways and means of making sure the collection of the data, the key results, is done in a consistent way across the enterprise. Yeah.
Totally. That's a pattern for success. Have an independent central data team, and then you've got the single version of the truth, single definition of the metrics, and not self-attestation. I've made that mistake in the past where we had business lines self-attesting data, and a bunch of it was just outright lies. Because bonuses depended on it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Tell me how you measure me and I'll tell you how I behave. To wrap up, what is your summary advice to other large traditional organizations who are thinking about adopting OKRs or are on the journey to adopting OKRs? Willie?
Look, I think I'm not one for fads or, you should be doing X, Y, Z just because everybody else is doing it. I think it's really, really important that you undertake this journey, because it will help you to run your business better with high impact. And whatever your strategic reality is, and every business and every industry is different, right? This is a mechanism and an approach that can help you, in my mind, to be much more intentional around what you're focusing on, what you're doing, to realize your strategic imperatives. And I think that for me is really critical, to have that sort of mindset, to say we want to be more impactful in terms of our strategic objectives. We want to really, really make sure we hit the mark. We don't want to hit and miss and maybe, and we want to be a lot more focused. So I think if that's your mindset in OKRs, I think it can definitely help you. I think the second thing is that you should, and we discussed that through the conversation, Jon and Alena, is that you are actually tackling a cultural journey here in a way. It's not a leadership thing. It's not a science thing. Asking people to do things in a different way. OKRs may or may not be aligned to the way people are individually contracted. In the case of Vodafone, there was a gap because we have a very specific grow your impact. This is your personal objectives for the year, and so you have to be 100% sure how the OKR approach aligns to other forms of target setting or performance tracking in the organization. In the beginning, it may well be that these things are a little bit loggerheads; they don't naturally align, and because it's, when it comes to targets, etc., John, you said it becomes personal. It's around human beings and it's around culture, how people behave. So I think be comfortable that, as leaders, as you tackle this journey, you have to change how people work and how people do things. And that means you touch culture in the organization, and that may come with its own challenges. I think the last one would be, and Alena would agree with me, is this, we said it over and over, is this, indeed, it sounds like motherhood and apple pie. Start small, prove it, and then scale fast. And that's still very much the case here, is prove to yourself that you can do it in an area sort of, friends or within the family, where you can make a few mistakes and of course adjust before you roll it out across the organization. And be patient. This is a multi-year journey because, strategy doesn't change. You don't achieve your strategic objectives in one financial year. So think beyond the financial year to financial year. Think about 3 financial years potentially that you calibrate those outcomes to. And be comfortable that it's going to take time for you to go through what Alena says, the crawl, walk, run. You're not going to sprint outright. You're going to crawl, and it can be frustrating, but I would be, I would really recommend this approach, John. As I said earlier through the conversation, it builds very well on a topic that we've spoken about over the last, I would think, 5 to 10 years. Is how do we do work differently in organizations? With the emergence of digital, now with AI, with agile ways of working. This for me is a natural extension of that in a way. And it lends itself very well. If you're an organization that are already comfortable to make work visible, to really work through and break down hierarchy in the organization, to work to outcomes, I think OKRs lends itself naturally, I think, to introduce it in enterprises like that. So, but stay the course. You're going to, as a leader, you'll be tested. Alena will tell you that it will be frustrating. You'll be angry at times, but it will also be very rewarding. I think if you start seeing the leadership teams responding, really buying into what you're doing, owning the OKRs through the sponsorships that Alena spoke about as well, it's very satisfying because you're knowing you're doing something really special that can help the organization to become even better. Alena?
Yeah, I think a couple of advices for the companies who are starting the OKR journey. Number one is really to find at least one sponsor, one kind of passionate leader who is really, really passionate about driving this change, also from the cultural perspective, and making this person advocate, right, for OKR implementation, experimenting in a sandbox, as Willie mentioned, right, experiment in a safe environment first to get some of the mechanics and prove the success to scale it. Number 3 would be like this co-creation approach, which if you want to go fast, go alone, right? But if you want to go far, go together. So sometimes it feels much, much slower if you're doing the co-creation and if you do bottom up and top down at the same time, because at the end, it's much, much harder to make decisions, right? If you involve everyone, but it's worth taking because the alignment is in the discussion. The alignment is actually not in the key result. The alignment is happening through the dialogue, through interpretation. What is time to market for you? What's for me? Right. So this is therefore super, super important from my perspective, and kind of storming those OKRs with a representation from different areas, different kind of hierarchy levels is very critical. And another one is driving accountability for data. For example, we created like working groups from the different CIO areas to get the data, to get the clear understanding, to create a kind of a dictionary. What is time to market? What is reusability for us, right? To really do it together and present again and again as a reference when we start collecting some of the metrics. And also at the beginning, a lot of times, especially when you have leaders coming from different organizations, you need to set a little bit expectation. What are OKRs? And Jon, it's the same as what you asked us this question, right? Because it seems to be obvious, but it's not. A lot of people understand it so differently, and it's good to have at least 1 or 2 pages of theory, which you can maybe reference first before it goes off rail completely, right? And people will start, similar to Willie, would just say, I don't know, like maybe we will put a key result or milestone in the project. And if you already explain and reference to this 2 pages where, okay, a good objective is, a good key result is, right? Then you can reference it again and again and have a refresher if needed to set a little bit of expectation, and accept that it's not perfect, accept that you start with crawling and really communicate it that you are crawling, right? Communicate, being transparent, and create this psychological safety where it's safe to fail, because the aspirational level in the first year, it's impossible to set it right? If especially for metrics which you're measuring for the first time, which you just introduced. So you will need to have a safe space to fail, learn, and adjust the aspiration level.
Love it.
Absolutely.
Love it. So, Willie, Alena, thank you very much for sharing your learnings. I like the fact that you're collectively exhibiting courage and vulnerability. I like the fact you're working out loud and you're sharing your learnings here. That itself is a signal. You know, even if it's 2 steps forwards and 1 step back and 2 steps forwards and 1 step back, the fact that you're experimenting and trying new things itself is a signal of improving and an intent to improve and to optimize for the context of your work. And I think that's very powerful. So I'm super appreciative of you sharing your learnings at Vodafone. It might be interesting to have another check-in in the future, you know, because see how things are even further down the journey. So Willie and Alena, thank you very much for sharing your learnings.